All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we're diving into a topic that's, well, let's just say it's one that's captivated people for centuries, really.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that can send shivers down your spine.
Yeah, we're talking about the prophecy of the 3 days of darkness.
But what's really interesting about this deep dive is that we're not looking at some ancient text or folklore,
Right.
We're actually going straight to the source, so to speak.
Okay.
Our source material is 3 hypnotic regression sessions,
Wow.
where these individuals, Oleg, Tamara, and Svetlana, explore their own personal interpretations of this prophecy.
So hypnosis and prophecy, that's a heck of a combo.
It really is, and right off the bat, it blends this mystical element with the psychological, which makes it really intriguing.
It does.
And I think the big question we're all going to try to unpack today is, what exactly is this prophecy, and should we be concerned? Like, how much attention should we actually pay to this?
That's the million-dollar question. Because, let's be honest, prophecies, they've been around forever. And, some have come true, some haven't. So where does this one fit in?
Right, and that's what makes these sessions so interesting, because all 3 subjects, and this is independently, mind you, under hypnosis, they point to Blessed Anna Maria Taigi,
Yeah.
an Italian mystic from the 18th and 19th centuries,
Got it.
as the originator of this prophecy.
Interesting. So not just some random internet rumor, there's a historical figure attached to it.
Exactly, and it's not just who originated it, but how they say it's being spread.
Oh.
They describe it being intentionally disseminated through established institutions,
Really? Like what?
specifically the Vatican.
The Vatican. So they're saying the Catholic Church is behind spreading this prophecy of darkness.
That's what these individuals under hypnosis seem to believe, and the reason they give, to instill fear and control.
Wow, that's a pretty heavy accusation.
It is, and it should make us think, right,
Absolutely.
about how often we encounter similar tactics in our own lives. I mean, think about it. Fear is a powerful motivator.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's advertising,
Political campaign.
social media,
Fear is everywhere.
it is. And recognizing these tactics, understanding that there's a history of this kind of manipulation, it can help us be more discerning.
Less likely to fall for it.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like that old saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
Exactly. And Tamara, one of the subjects, she even drew parallels between the prophecy and historical events like the 1918 influenza pandemic.
The Spanish flu.
Yeah, suggesting that these tactics of using fear and maybe even potentially manipulating events, it's not a new thing.
Right, it's happened before.
And maybe we're seeing a resurgence of it today in different forms.
It's kind of unsettling when you think about it like that.
It is. And that cyclical nature of fear and control, it's something we need to be aware of, If it's happened before throughout history, what's to say it can't happen again?
Yeah, that's a good point. So, okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty here. What does this prophecy actually say? What's going to happen during these 3 days of darkness?
Well, all 3 subjects seem to agree on the core elements. We're talking 3 days of, darkness, obviously,
Right.
a toxic, dangerous atmosphere,
No.
and this idea of harm coming to both the followers and the enemies of religion.
So no one is safe.
Not according to these visions.
Okay, so that's pretty scary stuff. But what actually causes the darkness? I mean, is it a supernatural event? Is it something man-made?
Well, that's where things get really interesting because their individual visions of what brings about this darkness, they're pretty different.
Okay, give me an example.
Oleg, for instance, he sees this massive cosmic event.
Okay.
He's talking about a planet or some sort of celestial body exploding, and the debris from that explosion, it blocks out the sun.
Like an eclipse, but on a grand scale.
Yeah, and if that wasn't enough, he also sees these insect-like metallic beings emerging from the earth during this time.
Whoa, hold on. Insect-like metallic beings. Where did they come from?
Well, that's not entirely clear, but he describes them as wreaking havoc and causing destruction.
Okay, so we've got a celestial apocalypse and some kind of alien invasion all rolled into one.
Yeah, Oleg's vision is pretty intense.
Got it. Now, what about Tamara? What does her vision of the darkness look like?
Tamara's vision is a bit more grounded, I guess you could say. She focuses on man-made disasters.
Okay.
She sees massive explosions at power plants, which then lead to this super thick smog that basically blankets the earth in darkness.
Oh, wow. So like a pollution apocalypse.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. And Svetlana, what about her vision?
Svetlana's vision is really interesting because it kind of blends the technological with the esoteric, you know?
Okay.
She describes the use of chemtrails and other technologies to create this dark cloud cover.
Like a man-made weather event.
Yeah, but she also talks about psychic attacks happening during this time.
Psychic attacks.
Through distorted light frequencies, which she believes would directly affect the pineal gland.
So it's like a double whammy, both physical and mental manipulation.
Exactly.
Wow, 3 very different interpretations of how we get to this darkness. But they all end up at the same place, those 3 days of darkness.
Exactly, and it kind of makes you think, doesn't it? Is the darkness itself maybe more of a metaphor? Like, is it representing something deeper than literal darkness?
That's a really good question. I mean, could it represent a loss of knowledge or maybe a loss of control, like on a societal level?
It's definitely something to think about. But before we go down that rabbit hole, I think we need to address the big elephant in the room.
Okay, what's that?
Who or what is behind all of this? Who's orchestrating these 3 days of darkness?
All right, so who doing it?
Well, this is where things get really interesting and maybe even a little bit creepy.
All ears.
Because all 3 of these individuals under hypnosis, and again, remember, they've never met, never discussed these things before.
Right.
They all point to the same culprit.
Okay, who?
They call it the deep state or a shadow government.
Okay, so now we're getting into conspiracy theory territory.
Yeah, and their descriptions of this controlling force, well, let's just say they tap into some pretty common anxieties we're seeing in the world today.
Like what?
Well, Oleg, for example, he talks about reptilian beings who have infiltrated human institutions and the media.
Reptilian beings, really, like lizard people.
That's what he describes. And he believes they're subtly manipulating people towards self-destruction.
Okay, now that's a little out there, even for me.
I know, reptilian beings might sound far-fetched, but the underlying fear, the idea that there are hidden agendas and people in power are manipulating us, that's certainly a relatable concern, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I guess it doesn't have to be literal lizard people. It could be any powerful group operating in secrecy.
Exactly. And Tamar's vision, it echoes that sentiment, but through a different lens.
How so?
Well, she describes plans to seize control of global networks, the internet, banking systems, even personal phones.
Whoa, so like a total digital takeover.
Pretty much. And she believes this could happen through a nanocomputer virus, something that could potentially control people's minds.
Okay, now we're getting into some Black Mirror stuff here.
Right. And it plays into those very real anxieties we have about loss of privacy, technological control, and this idea that powerful forces are influencing our lives in ways we don't even realize.
It's a pretty bleak picture they're painting.
It is.
Yeah.
And then there's this recurring theme of population control that pops up in all 3 sessions.
Population control, like reducing the number of people on Earth.
Exactly. And it's often tied to this idea of weeding out the weak or undesirable elements of society.
Oh, wow, that's getting pretty dark.
Yeah, Tamara even connects this agenda to the Spanish flu, suggesting it was intentionally used to eliminate certain segments of the population.
Wow, that's a pretty disturbing thought.
It is. And it's unsettling to see how this type of dehumanizing language is still used today to justify various forms of control and discrimination.
Yeah, you're right. It's like history repeating itself.
Exactly. And recognizing this kind of language, challenging it whenever we encounter it, is so crucial. You know, it's the first step towards breaking these cycles of control and manipulation.
Okay, so we've got this deep state. They're spreading this prophecy of darkness. They want to control the population. But what's their end game? What's the ultimate goal here?
Well, according to these individuals, it all boils down to power. They envision a world where people are essentially slaves to the agenda of this hidden group.
So a one-world government kind of scenario.
Yeah, something like that. And they even bring up figures like Bill Gates, specifically his proposal to dim the sun to combat climate change.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that.
Right, and they suggest that this whole focus on global warming could actually be a smokescreen for a more sinister agenda.
So they're saying it's not really about saving the planet, it's about control.
That's what they seem to believe, yeah. And it just goes to show that we need to be critical of information, especially when it comes from positions of power. It's vital to question narratives, you know, to consider the potential agendas behind them.
To think for ourselves.
Exactly. And always ask yourself, who benefits from this information being presented in this way?
Yeah, that's good advice.
Yeah.
It definitely makes you think about all the complexities of the world and all the forces at play, both seen and unseen.
It really does. And before we jump into what these individuals see as potential countermeasures to this encroaching darkness, I think it's a good time to just take a moment to reflect.
Yeah.
For you, the listener, what stands out to you in all of this? What resonates with your own experiences and worldview? Think about that for a second. It's easy to get lost in all this, with the doom and gloom and the prophecies and everything.
Yeah.
But what I think is really fascinating is that each of these individuals, they offer some glimpses of hope, too.
Oh, okay, so it's not all bad news.
No, not exactly.
So what are they saying? Like, is there a way to stop this darkness from happening?
Well, they each have their own ideas about potential countermeasures, ways we might be able to resist or even prevent this darkness.
Okay, I'm definitely curious to hear about that. What are some of the things they suggest?
Well, Oleg, for instance, he really emphasizes individual awakening
Okay.
and the importance of conscious choice.
So like waking up to the reality of the situation and making choices based on that awareness.
Exactly. He actually describes humanity as being at a crossroads, like this critical moment where we each have to decide
Decide what?
whether we're going to align with love and reason, as he puts it,
Okay.
or succumb to these destructive forces.
So it's about choosing love over fear, basically.
Yeah, and it's about recognizing that our individual choices, they have power.
It can make a difference.
Right, like a ripple effect,
Hmm.
contributing to the collective reality that we all
That's
experience.
like that.
And then you have Tamara.
Okay, what did she say?
Well, her focus is more on resisting technological manipulation.
Okay, that makes sense, considering she was the one who talked about the nanocomputer virus and all that.
Exactly. And she advocates for disconnecting from digital networks, spending less time online.
So like a digital detox.
Yeah, in a way. She believes that being constantly plugged in makes us more vulnerable to outside influence and control.
It's almost like she's saying unplug from the matrix.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's a great analogy, actually, and it really raises some important questions about our relationship with technology.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, are we in control of technology or is it controlling us?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And it's something we all need to be thinking about more seriously, I think.
Absolutely. Now, what about Svetlana? What's her take on all of this?
Svetlana's countermeasure is interesting. It's about consciously rejecting negativity.
Okay, like just trying to stay positive in the face of all this darkness.
Yeah, but it's more than that. It's about actively choosing not to feed into fear, anxiety, despair, all that.
So it's like a conscious effort to shift your focus, to amplify the positive, even when things are tough.
Exactly. And she believes that we have this innate power to actually transmute negative energies, both physical and metaphysical, into something positive.
Wow, that's pretty powerful.
It is, right. And what I find really interesting is that all three of these individuals, even though their visions of 3 days of darkness are so different,
Yeah, they all see it differently,
they actually arrive at a similar solution:
which is,
conscious choice.
okay, so it's not about just passively waiting for something bad to happen or hoping someone else will fix it. It's about taking action ourselves.
Right, and making choices that are aligned with our values, with what we believe in, and that, maybe that's how we can not only protect ourselves, but actually influence the collective trajectory.
Like our choices matter, they have an impact on the world around us.
Exactly, and if we bring this back to the listener's world, it suggests that even small acts of awareness, small choices, they can make a difference.
Right, what?
Like choosing kindness over anger, supporting local businesses instead of mega corporations, even just taking a break from technology for a few hours each day, all of that.
So it's about being mindful of our choices and understanding that those choices can ripple outwards, impacting others.
Absolutely, it's about becoming conscious creators.
Of our own lives, but also of the world around us.
Well said. Now, before we dive into some of the interesting common threads that run through all three of these individuals' experiences, I want to pose a question to you, the listener.
Okay.
Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you were being manipulated by fear? Like someone or something was trying to control you through fear?
Good question.
Think about how you responded. What tools or strategies did you use to navigate that experience? Just take a moment to reflect on that before we continue our deep dive.
It's pretty wild when you think about it that these three people, they've never met, never talked about any of this stuff before.
Right.
And yet, under hypnosis, they have all these similar experiences.
It is remarkable.
Like they all sense this looming threat. They talk about manipulation and control in very similar ways. It's really kind of freaky, actually.
It is fascinating, and it definitely makes you wonder if there's something deeper at play here, you know?
Yeah, like maybe they're tapping into some kind of collective unconscious or something.
Possibly.
Let's start with that feeling of urgency they all describe, like this intense feeling that something big is about to happen, like they need to do something to prevent a catastrophe.
Yeah, that sense of urgency, I think it reflects a lot of the anxiety we're seeing in the world today, you know?
Right, like everyone's on edge about something.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. We're bombarded with negative news constantly.
Yeah, yeah.
Political polarization, climate change, economic uncertainty. It's no wonder people are feeling this sense of unease.
Like something's got to give.
Exactly. And then there's that recurring theme of manipulation and control.
Right, like they all feel like they're being controlled by outside forces.
Yeah, whether it's through technology, media, or even some kind of psychic influence, they all describe this feeling of being manipulated.
And that resonates with a lot of people today, I think, especially with all the concerns about data privacy and social media algorithms and all that.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, in this digital age, it's easy to feel like we're being manipulated in ways we don't even fully understand.
Yeah, like we're all just puppets dancing on strings.
And then you have that shared vision of a deep state or a shadow government.
Right, the classic conspiracy theory stuff.
But it's interesting how this idea of a hidden power structure, it keeps popping up throughout history, you know?
Yeah, like it's a story we keep telling ourselves over and over again.
Maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe it's a way of making sense of the world, you know?
Like when things feel chaotic and out of control, we look for someone to blame.
Exactly. And this idea of a shadowy elite pulling the strings, it provides a simple explanation, even if it's not necessarily the truth.
Right, it's easier to believe in a conspiracy than to face the complexity of reality.
But what strikes me most about all of this is that even though their visions are filled with fear and uncertainty,
Yeah.
there's also this glimmer of hope, this recognition that we're not powerless.
Like we have a choice in how we respond to all of this.
Exactly, and that brings us to the big question, the one that's been lingering throughout this whole deep dive.
Okay, hit me with it.
If this prophecy ISS, a manufactured plan, a tool of manipulation and control, what does that tell us about the power of belief?
Oh, wow, that's a deep one.
Think about it. If enough people believe in a negative outcome, can they actually manifest it into reality?
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly, and that's why critical thinking is so important, you know?
Right, we can't just blindly accept everything we hear.
We have to question, analyze, consider different perspectives.
Don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Exactly, and that's especially true when it comes to prophecies and predictions.
So this deep dive hasn't just been about exploring the 3 days of darkness. It's been about exploring the power of belief, the nature of fear, and ultimately the importance of conscious choice.
Well said. And on that note, I'd like to leave you, the listener, with one final thought. What if, instead of fearing the darkness, we focus on creating a world filled with light? What if, instead of waiting for someone to save us, we choose to become the heroes of our own stories? And what if, instead of letting fear control us, we embrace love as our guiding force? The choice, as always, is ours.